Mesdames, Messieurs, merci d'accueillir Anne Hidalgo, la maire de Paris, et Ángel Gurría, secrétaire général de l'OCDE. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Anne Hidalgo, the mayor of Paris, and Ángel Gurría, the secretary general of the OECD.
We're just all human beings on the same planet. That is the initial connection between all of us.
Die großen Probleme dieser Welt, Armut, Hunger, Umweltkatastrophen, Klimawandel und ähnliche, lassen sich nur gemeinsam lösen.
Ce qui est sûr, c'est que il y a une partie du monde qui va mal.
We have disparities between the rich and the poor in different levels of education and employment, but there is hope.
I worry about the migrant population. I do work for a children's association where there are migrant children. What will become of them when they're 19, 20, 25?
We've fought for so many rights, but if we are not careful, we'll go back in a heartbeat.
Aujourd'hui, j'ai beaucoup d'empathie et j'ai des enfants et je me demande quel type de société nous allons léguer à nos enfants, aux futures générations.
Ce que je dis à mes enfants, c'est surtout l'éducation. Je leur dis que moi, je n'ai pas d'héritage financier à leur donner, mais j'ai un capital d'éducation à leur donner qui sera un passeport international, universel pour eux.
حلمي بشكل عام عني وعن عائلتي إنه أرجع التقى فيهم وكون بجانبهم لما عم كون الأسرة الخاصة فيني.
What makes me happy is other people that are happy, my family, Legos, my friends.
I love dancing because dance is joy. When someone gets up to dance, it means they are feeling happy.
آرزوی بزرگ ما میخواد بود که یک روز ما ببینم در کشور ما صلح هست، امنیت هست، فقر بیچارگی نیست دیگه، مردم حقوقش برش رسیدگی میشه.
Estabilidad, seguridad, confianza, tolerancia. El sentido económico no es muy importante. Lo que cuenta más es el sentirse bien.
Aujourd'hui, voilà, la parole est décomplexée à cause d'Internet. Peu importe d'où l'on vient, on peut créer quelque chose, on peut créer une application, créer un nouveau jeu, un nouveau média et faire entendre sa voix. Et donc ça, c'est beau.
I used to think that I was the only little black girl with a disability. There are thousands and thousands who are online who also grew up thinking the same thing, who now can connect with one another because of technology, and that's incredible.
Et c'est dans les moments où on est face à des problèmes, des challenges, c'est les moments dans lesquels on va se retourner le plus souvent vers d'autres personnes et où on va vraiment apprécier la valeur des personnes qui nous entourent en fait.
On se pose des questions, on se dit bon, si on veut travailler tous dans le même sens et si certains commencent à baisser les bras, est-ce qu'on va y arriver?
C'est quand les pays travaillent ensemble que finalement les citoyens peuvent travailler ensemble et permettent en fait de construire des choses à impact beaucoup plus fort partout dans le monde, parce qu'aujourd'hui en fait tout le monde est interconnecté.
Acho que deve haver senso de comunidade entre os países, na qual eles reservam e dedicam parte do seu tempo e esforços por bem comum.
I tell world leaders to do better. Do better for your own citizens. Do better for other citizens. Just think of other people before you think of yourself.
¿Qué puede haber cambiado en mí desde que llegué de Guatemala, aquí en Francia? Ha cambiado en mí la tolerancia, la paciencia, la mirada hacia los otros, la comprensión, esperar, saber respirar en la vida.
Madame Hidalgo, dear ministers, ambassadors, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, what brings us together? Well, we all come from different corners of the world, from different backgrounds, times, professions. We carry different cultures. We carry different stories, different concerns, life expectations, different hopes, different fears. So what brings us together? Today, in Paris, at the OECD, this beautiful morning of the spring of 2018, while the world is going through one of the most convoluted, complex, and turbulent phases in history. What brings us together today is a belief, a conviction, a certainty that multilateralism is needed more than ever. We are here today because we agree that in a globalized, interdependent world, international cooperation is the most enlightened way to improve our well-being. Perhaps the only way. We're facing challenges that none of us can solve on their own. Our countries are connected, our destinies interwoven, our solutions entangled. In the words of Dostoevsky, we are all responsible to all, for all. So welcome to the OECD 2018 Forum and the OECD Week. Welcome to explore the DNA and the potential of collective action. Welcome to the OECD. Lors du Forum de l'année dernière, nous nous sommes penchés sur les de plus en plus profonds.
We have been focusing on the increasing divides that have been fracturing our societies and our communities. This year we will be focusing, therefore, on what brings us together. We are reminding the world that the world is a community. We are focusing on the common challenges that face us all and the objectives that we are pursuing. Our goals in order to create better policies and better international standards. We are drawing on our strength in diversity. We are reinforcing the connections between us to define a new approach to multilateralism that leaves nobody behind. We must build bridges We must work towards agreements, and we must make an effort to bring countries together. Because what brings us together is so much greater, so much more powerful, so much more long-lasting than what divides us.
Also time to ask ourselves why these pushbacks, why these antibodies to our common cause are emerging. It's time to recognize that something is not working when the world's richest 1% accumulate half of the world's wealth. When more than 60% of the world's employed work informally. When the richest 10% of the OECD population now earn 10 times more than the poorest 10%. 10. We say, well, so what? Well, it's up from 7 times a generation ago. So in one generation, it has deteriorated by 35 to 40%. It's going in the wrong direction fast. Now, when trust in governments, institutions, political parties, banks, enterprises, even in international organizations, has decreased to record lows. There's cynicism about these institutions. And why? Well, because national and global economic systems keep leaving too many behind. Thus, we need to rethink and relaunch international cooperation. Multilateralism has delivered, and multilateral actually is delivering as we speak in hundreds of fronts. Think of hunger, extreme poverty, AIDS, malaria, child labor, the SDGs, the Paris Agreement. Here at the OECD, we have reached remarkable agreements on tax transparency, on BEPS, on anti-bribery, on better corporate governance, and on responsible business conduct, just to name a few. And we're also advancing new major multilateral initiatives to make globalization more humane, like the Inclusive Growth Framework and the new job strategy, both of which will be rolled out and adopted at the Ministerial Council meeting. Now, our collaboration with the G20 has grown over the years, helping us bring large emerging economies to adopt OECD standards on things like tax, corporate government, investment. We have also reached crucial deals on women's empowerment, steel overproduction, just to mention a few. A lot is already being achieved multilaterally. Toutefois, beaucoup reste encore à améliorer pour rendre le multilatéralisme plus efficace.
And yet a lot still must be done to make multilateralism more effective, more transparent, more inclusive, and more dependable. We must recast multilateralism to achieve more responsible results that are more effective and more inclusive. And this is the title of our council meeting at ministerial level, this year chaired by France, our ambassador who is here, and Madame Mayor, and it is co-chaired by Latvia and New Zealand. We must bring multilateralism closer to our populations, civil society, the universities. We must bring young people closer to a sustainable way of life for our planet. We must improve the visibility of our work, and we must ensure that our activities become better known, that the way we conduct these efforts becomes better known, so that governments and citizens will stop seeing multilateralism as a zero-sum game and will challenge in the right way.
International standards to level the global playing field. The OECD has developed close to 450 multilateral legal instruments since its creation. More than half of these remain in force today. Now, to keep them relevant, we launched an OECD standard-setting review to make sure that the OECD legal instruments continue to respond to the challenges faced by governments today. We asked very simply, what would you keep of those standards? What would you change? And what would you scrap? We detonated a process where 260 legal instruments were reviewed, little over 6 months, resulting in 32 abrogations of outdated instruments and follow-up actions for 134 instruments up to 2021. A new beginning, a new roadmap, and one that will keep us going, that will keep us pertinent, that will keep us relevant, that will keep us impactful. We'll follow up closely. We'll stay the course. This is one of the most crucial reforms we have ever entertained. Now, we also need to strengthen our commitment with inclusive growth. We need to put inclusive growth at the heart of the multilateral system. In spite of recent improvements, inequalities have remained high, and in some countries, they continue to increase. And they blight people's lives. They waste their potential contribution. They erode their trust in democracy. This is personally unfair at the individual level, but it is also politically dangerous. It's corrosive even for our economies. Now, our work shows that inequalities reduce aggregate productivity. They reduce aggregate growth. Je vais mettre la cloche là. Because they reduce the capacity of the poorest 40% to invest in the education of skills and skills of their children, precisely the 40% that we would like to elevate, the 40% that we would like to give better chances to. So as we focus on this framework for policy action on inclusive growth that we will be rolling out in the next few days, there is scope to strengthen business dynamism while simultaneously, and I stress the word simultaneously, aligning wage growth with productivity growth. Stronger productivity growth is necessary, but it is not sufficient to sustain economic growth over the long term. Unless equity issues are also addressed, it will not work. Now, as we will highlight tomorrow in the presentation of our economic outlook, the upswing in the global economy is creating opportunities to ensure that growth works for all. This is good news, and we should seize those opportunities. The forum is also an opportunity to discuss the impacts and the enormous potential of digitalization. Digitalization and its offspring, social networks, artificial intelligence, big data, the Internet of Things, are rapidly changing all facets of our societies and economies. They're bringing cascades of human progress. Health apps, genomic quantification, e-government, surgical robots, digital grids, renewable energy, crowdfunding, online education. Are they also changing our values? Are they also changing our freedom? Are they also having an impact on our privacy, on our psychological stability, on our levels of anxiety, our stress? Are they creating new global risks and vulnerabilities? Are they affecting the learning capacity of our children at school? Are they threatening our jobs? We estimate that 14% of the jobs in the OECD countries are at high risk of being automated. But perhaps just as consequential, about an additional third of the jobs could face substantial disruption. So that's the two together, practically half of the workforce. There are also studies that foresee equivalent amounts of new digitally driven labor opportunities. That's the bright side. But will reskilling be feasible in all sectors? If the opportunities arise, will the workforce be able to profit from the opportunities? Will we have the workforce that is prepared to take these opportunities? We need the evidence. We need the training. We need the policies. And that's what we're trying to produce at the OECD. Our Going Digital project and the new OECD job strategy, which, as I said, we'll be presenting at the ministerial meeting, are taking a deep dive into these questions of advancing understanding these new technologies. And the idea is to give policymakers evidence and policy options to widen the connectivity, to strengthen cybersecurity, to make the most of the digital economy. These are the central questions of this forum. And there will be many other exciting discussions on startup ecosystems, women in tech, well-being budgets, biodiversity, loneliness, the future of work. We will debate major global challenges like integrating migrants, the different phases of trade, the future of democracy in the digital age, the state of multilateralism, the centrality of data. All this will be dynamized by idea factories and food for thought lunches. It will be a festival of ideas, a festival of solutions, a festival of better policies for better lives. Oh, dear friends, in one of the most emblematic and multicultural books, The Enchantress of Florence, Salman Rushdie wrote, quote, "This may be the curse of human race. Not that we are so different from one another, but that we are so alike." Well, I'd say, nice shot, Salman. But I'm afraid it's neither by itself. It's really the combination of both. It's our diversity and our similarities which makes us more resilient as the human race. The countries that learn to make the best of both our differences and common traits, celebrating their national specificity and their plurality, as much as their coincidences with the others, building bridges rather than divides, will lead this world. We're all cultural hybrids. We need each other to succeed. It's time that we turn that into a source of strength. Je vous invite à faire de ce forum.
Therefore, I urge you to do what it takes for this forum and for this ministerial meeting to be a success. Let's build on what brings us together. Let's come together to think about how the world could be more inclusive and more sustainable. And let us attempt together to build the foundations for such a world. Let us set ourselves to the task of developing and implementing better policies for better lives. Thank you, and I wish you all a very successful and interesting meeting. Thank you.
Mesdames, Messieurs, le privilège.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor, privilege, and a source of personal satisfaction to welcome a good friend, Anne Hidalgo, the mayor of the city of Paris.
Monsieur le Secretary General, Ángel Gurría, ministers, ambassadors, members of parliament, friends, ladies and gentlemen.
The OECD Forum, a major event which gathers every year public and private sector actors united to build a more sustainable, innovative and inclusive world. And I would like to underline how fortunate we feel to have in Paris an international organization concerned by the future of our planet and human-centered. Inclusive growth, international cooperation, digitalization, these are the three main issues of the OECD Forum. There are also crucial issues for cities all over the world. Climate change and disasters, social inequalities and refugees are more visible in large cities. Hopefully, cities are also the perfect scale to find solutions and to reach the global objectives of the Paris Agreement. Once again, I would like to welcome the efforts made in this area by the OECD in order to highlight their role and to improve the dialogue between cities, states, and international organizations. On a local scale, global warming policies, social housing, public transportation, internet access are good political tools to cope with these challenges. Mais permettez-moi à présent en français de vous dire
But let me now say in French how important the work being done here at the OECD under the leadership of Ángel Gurría is. It's exceptional work and we really need it. I would like to thank you for this. The fact that an international organization like the OECD is pushing us to improve knowledge, to work on our science, on exchanges, on the basis of international studies, international cooperation, the international dissemination of best practice is an exceptional good fortune for the planet. Today we are very blessed to have an international organization that enables us to work in a spirit of multilateralism and respect, and which makes it possible to bring to the forefront what underlies humanity, which enables humanity to project itself into the future, which enables us to transmit to a new generation what we have learned together, and perhaps a vision for the future that will be a more peaceful one, a more balanced and a more egalitarian approach. The OECD plays an essential role, and I feel that I must say that here, because it pushes all of us, public and private decision makers, whether we are working at the level of states, at the level of cities, at the level of territories, even the rural areas. This organization is pushing us to make sure that we understand before we act, that we have the knowledge before we launch into new initiatives. And once again, another thing I would like to say, the OECD is one of the only international organizations to be looking at the long term, not just focusing on the short term. It is enabling us to recenter the values of our economies, of our countries and territories, not just on a short-term basis, but looking to the longer future. And this is one of the things that the OECD is making possible for us. If, for example, we could achieve the signature of an agreement like the Paris Agreement, it's not just because the United States and other states and other non-government organizations, cities and companies have understood the importance of this challenge and this difficulty facing humanity. It's because this organization and others like it had prepared the way for such an agreement to be forged by looking towards the longer-term future. And Secretary General, I think that you were essential in pushing this approach at the OECD, and among other reasons for that, it was because you were supporting the cause of women. You are surrounded by women, you have women directors, women in senior management. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not trying to tell you that women are better than men. Of course not. But once again, we must work together on an equal footing. The life expression, the experience, the professional experience, the political experience of women is different. While women are in a majority in the international population, they've always been treated as a minority, which has led them to develop survival instincts and understanding of the context in which we are living that is more typical of minorities. And fortunately, women have survived. And fortunately, we have also men in key positions like Angel Gurria who have made it possible for women to contribute that point of view, that experience. And I believe that that is one of the things that is serving as a driving force in the OECD's role in this world, enabling humanity not just to survive but to live well. Perhaps we owe that in part to your intelligence, Angel, in opening your organization up to this expertise and experience that women can contribute. Today, big cities are in the front line of all of the impacts of globalization, for better and for worse. It is in our big cities that the impact of climate change is being felt the most. It is in our big cities that we are seeing the influx of refugees driven by poverty, by war, by terrorism, and we don't quite know exactly how these flows are working and what the causes are, but it is all of these things. It is in our big cities that we are brought face to face with the most powerful and violent effects of these trends. But it is also in our big cities that all of our creative citizens gather, those who have been born into the digital era and who, on the basis of these new technologies, are now inventing new services, new economic activities, the new interconnectivity of the world of tomorrow. It is in our big cities that all of this is happening. It is happening elsewhere in the world as well, but perhaps in our world cities, Paris and the other major capitals, these things are happening with greater impact and greater violence and are confronting our political decision makers, our leaders, our citizens, our governmental and non-governmental organizations, private companies, bringing us all to think about what we can do in the face of these new phenomena, these more powerful phenomena, these great impacts that we are experiencing today. How can we act without getting it wrong with regard to the future? How can we act without ever preventing future generations from finding their own place in turn and inventing the new future? These are questions that are troubling us daily, from the smallest levels of questions to the major issues. If I act in this way with regard to climate change today, if I act or if I do not act with regard to the influx of refugees, if I give opportunities to young people through education or I don't, what will be the impact? What if I use social networks, the social media, well or badly in my activities? These are questions that we are facing daily. And in order to find our way here, we need to be prepared to make mistakes. Mistakes are human. But when we make mistakes, we need to respond quickly and correct those errors so we don't drag too many people down with us. And so at the level of cities, those of us who are in a position to do so must act with enlightenment. And organizations like the OECD must help us and shed light on these issues. Because very quickly we propagate the consequences of these decisions. We are all interconnected. There is a certain freedom, a certain lightness and flexibility associated with these new social media, these new technologies. They are in a way freed from diplomacy, but in a sense, no, they are bound up in those same imperatives. In a multilateral world, we must all be working together, cooperating to come up with solutions. We also must invent solutions that do not yet exist, and that is really the major challenge before us. We must do so without error, enabling future generations in turn to survive, to live well, and to invent the ongoing future. This is a very complex task because we live in a very complex world. And so being able to gather here among all these nationalities, all these different levels of governance, benefiting from the contribution of science, of the knowledge of researchers, is something that is really quite essential. I am one of those who believes that digitalization, this huge industrial revolution that it supposes, is something that will help us. However, I also believe that this help cannot replace human decision-making, human agency, the action of human societies themselves in the context of the democratic framework that we have created. All of these things are aids to decision-making, but at the end of the day, no algorithm can replace human decision-making. And we need to bear this in mind. Algorithms can help us, but we need human agency in the decision-making. Now, perhaps in the future we'll be able to translate our thinking and our desires and benefits into algorithms. I don't question that, but I believe that it is human decision-making of politicians, of entrepreneurs and industrialists, of our everyday citizens that must continue to have the forefront. We must also recognize complexity. We must recognize and use the decision-making aids that we have all around us, and which the OECD is enabling us to better understand and know. It is the exchange of best practice quickly and effectively that enables us to act well. But it is also our democracies and the functioning of our democracies that we must protect and strengthen if we want to ensure that our convictions and our values guide us in our decision-making and do so well. This is another thing that is so important, and I believe that this is what Angel Gurria has been telling us in his speech as well. We are beings for whom values are extremely important. An international organization like the OECD places these imperatives at the center of its questioning of the performance of our economies, of our systems of public and private governance. An organization like the OECD is placing humanism at the end of the day at the center of this effort, because we all share this planet. And this is a very optimistic endeavor. I think it's something that gives us cause for optimism. The fact that this is being thought about here, that it is being disseminated more broadly, made more visible, shows us that there is a path ahead of us. All of these players, the public and private decision makers, politicians, researchers, NGOs, must take up the challenge and make more visible these values. This is what I'm trying to do at the level of my own city, but also at the network of mayors and cities levels, also in the context of the champion mayors. Translating these values into acts of management in that context. And I believe that the organization is helping us daily to translate those values into concrete action. These are the values that must serve as a compass to guide us when we deal with climate change, combating pollution, making decisions with regard to taking in refugees, when we're taking decisions with regard to combating inequality. And I'll conclude on these points. All of these major challenges that we're facing all relate to the idea of how we can better live together. It's been said there is no possible survival for our economies, for our political systems, for our institutional systems without looking at the issue of inequalities and correcting those inequalities. The world cannot only be built on the context of the 1% or even the 10% of the world elite, of which we are a part, without paying any attention to what's happening all around that, the middle classes, the poorest populations, refugees, those who are seeking our help. And we know that. In our hearts we know this. Such flagrant inequalities can do nothing other than generate crisis, war, poverty, terrorism, violence. Cannot but push those who have everything to take refuge behind walls, to withdraw to more restricted areas of the planet. And that is not any kind of workable future for our children or for the world. What we are facing today, I believe, is the challenge of bringing the greatest number of people into the fold, ensuring that the very small minority of elites of the world are not allowed to continue that introspection. These big cities that have everything, that talk about things only among themselves, that could almost do without states, must be challenged. We must say to them, are you not creating a kind of archipelago floating above the world that would work very well in isolation? Without paying attention to the rest of the planet, including other territories, other nations, which gave rise to these big cities in the first place. If that is to happen, it will be to the detriment of everyone. We cannot afford to isolate ourselves in these ways, leaving aside those who do not belong to this very small elite. Because we understand, I think we know, that things cannot work in this way. It is a way of generating a world that is even more violent than the world that we know today. So yes, these globalized elites do want to hold on to what they have, but we need to ensure that they bring the middle classes and the lower classes and the poorest populations along with them. This is what we've been advocating for a long time. Growth that respects the long term, that respects the planet, that recognizes and respects the dignity of everybody in our societies, that supports our economies and supports the value created by all of these men and women of the world population. This is the world that we can all work towards, that we can all work to build. Angel Gurria, you can be sure of the support of these big cities, of these territories where people are questioning the current state of affairs, that are looking to innovate. These very progressive men and women who are moved by a spirit of humanism, who understand that it is not by building walls at the level of our cities that we will win the battles of the future. Quite to the contrary, it is by bringing everyone in, by bringing everybody up together, that we will achieve our goals. We've heard some quotes, and I would like to finish with two quotes of Martin Luther King, stating things that seem to me so clear, so self-evident, that I carry them with me everywhere. The first is this: it is better to live together as brothers than to die together as fools. And I think that everybody can understand that sentiment. And the second quote from Martin Luther King is that all those who prefer peace need to organise themselves as well as those who prefer war. Well, we are all here as people who prefer peace. Let's get organised, and this is again what the OECD is offering us today. Thank you very much.